Hello, everybody. Welcome back to This and That, aka my advice channel. So, I played sports for 14 years of soccer, about since I was in second grade. I think that's 10 years of track, maybe three, 4. Yeah, 10 years of track and field, and then I coached for like 2 to 3 years. So I have spent a lot of time around sports. I still do fitness. I'm currently in a rugby legacy home, but I don't play rugby. I mostly do intramural, and so not in the competitive environment, not in the cutting edge. I never went on to play in college, so I was really good. I peaked sophomore year, and then I fell off, lost to number one California. Yada yada yada. So much story, so much yap. Bottom line is, I've spent a lot of time playing sports. I think there's a lot of really good sports advice out there. So I frankly am not the sage of all sports knowledge. Like if you follow Squat University, I think that's really good stuff for like rehab that I personally did. A lot of injury prevention. Look up, prevent your sciatica. Really work on that core strength and that back strength. Like that's good stuff for you. And there's a lot of good fitness stuff out there. Like especially fighting fatigue. I think like CDF Fitness or something. But being a fitness influencer, at least what I've seen out there, there's a lot of interesting information for sure. You don't necessarily are going to be a good athlete if you are big, if you're one of those like really chunky people, but there still is stuff to gain that I'm like, no matter what, you do have to push yourself hard if you want to grow. No matter what, you actually have to put the minutes in. That is developing your technique. Yes, there are two sides to muscle development. There is the muscle memory. There is your nervous system. There is also the so muscle memory being defined as your muscles reacting to something. So skipping the brain altogether and having that having a reaction, right? Like I don't know if you've ever done that knee test. I think that's sixth grade where you tap something on somebody's knee and there's a reflex, but your fastest possible reaction time is 100 milliseconds, and it is faster if you have a reflex directly happen in your muscle. Have you ever seen those videos of somebody like butchering a fish and then the fish starts flopping around even though it's dead? Like that is muscle memory, and you don't even need a brain to have that, but you do need to still train your nervous system. And then there also is mind muscle connection for muscle development, that is not only having stronger and better muscles but also getting more out of your muscles. And then other very important elements like recovery are present, like what you actually eat, setting yourself up for success, and your environment, like your mentality towards failure and stuff. All this good stuff plays into you and how well you perform during sports, and let's dissect some of it. Number one most important thing, recovery. You can work as hard as you want, and it will not matter at all unless you recover. Of course, there's multiple variables at play, so this is my personal opinion, but actually sleeping at night, one of the reasons why I personally didn't do very good, especially in a sport that is entirely based on physical performance, such as track and field, like sleeping was the most significant factor towards my performance. And then other significant factor is eating well, like eating the right things. I have been dealing with cramps for the longest time until I actually started eating and hydrating right. So I'm just dumping hydration in that eating bucket. But I could not emphasize enough how much of a performance boost it is to just eat food and eat it at the right time. It is actually subjective. Fun fact, like sometimes I would eat a whole rotisserie chicken and then run the 200 and still be able to perform. Other times I would not be able to eat. And if I ate like 2 hours before, not 2 hours before, I'd throw up by the time I got out to soccer. So the type of activity that you do is determinant of the type of eating that you should do. Like long jump, for example, which was my best event, was a lot of goddamn standing around, and having like something very nutritious like a nut bar or a Cliff bar in my system or a protein shake about like 30 minutes before, and then I'm doing my run throughs, and it's not as nearly as intense or aerobic as soccer, and my stomach could handle it and everything was okay. And I would be able to survive the event, which could go up to like 20 to 30 minutes, especially on those terrible days where you're not like a finalist or it's not an invitational, so you're just in the general mosh of a bunch of people in high school and you're sitting in a line of like 30 to 40 people. Like you have to fuel like right. Versus soccer was a more aerobic sport, right? So I needed to eat like more, but eat a big amount, like 2 3 hours before the game, and then I have a little snack right before we get in there, and I've been hydrating throughout the entire day. You have to hydrate through the night. You have to sleep well the night before. You rest. You save that competition energy. That's very real. And then the mental aspects, of course, where you are building up that mental energy, that competition. You're trying to not be anxious. You're confident in your abilities and your skills from your training, all that hard work that you did, and that you actually internalize it. So I already said it, but number one most important thing, recovery. You have to sleep. You have to actually internalize your hard work. You have to give your brain time to adapt and develop, and you have to be able to train your nervous system in that environment. So utmost most important thing is to recover and then eat, as I've already said. And now moving down the list is these mental aspects, but most importantly is working hard. If you want to actually push your body, you need to push your body to failure in order to develop more strength. You need to actually be thinking about the work that you are doing. Like, look at your biceps or look in the mirror when you do an exercise. Focus on having the correct form. So I should say working hard and also working smart. If you're working on technique stuff, like, treat every rep like it's an in-game rep. They say that when you actually get into the game, that you are going to be at the weakest part of your training when you're doing that. And also, it means so much to not actually have to think when you about your technique. Whenever you're doing something, like, I should be able to just think, okay, curler, instead of having to think I stroke on the right side of the ball, left to right, diagonal, and then curve my foot. And also, like, I plant hard, but I keep my momentum. Like, if you're ever in your car and you stop at a corner and then you don't stop all the way and then you do that rolling stop, you kind of want that for a curler, because it helps you follow through along the side and really exaggerates that curve to have your hips still shifting while you are hitting the ball. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, when you think hip shift, you think complete pivot, but no, I mean, like, you have momentum while you hit the ball and you hit that curler. But it's a very soccer specific analogy, but that mental aspect of, I am here to work hard, I'm going to work hard, I'm training under a difficult circumstance, I'm going to push through. I have that priority of, like, I cannot afford to be lackluster and, like, be nonchalant. It's like, you are there to work. That is so important. And I know it's not, like, as relevant as, like, baseball. Like, there's more technique related sports that are not as cardio intensive, where, like, you're supposed to be chilling. But, like, football, American football, like, you need to push yourself and push hard. And you need to be pushing the limits. You need to be testing the people. You need to make it. You need, your base level of training needs to be better than their base level of training, and then you need to be able to execute on that. So far, recovery most important, and then your food and your hydration, so your satiety, and then also you're actually doing the exercises. Sorry, you actually putting the work in, and you're putting the work in the right way. And then at the bottom, mental. Of course, your mental generally does need to be aligned. Like, you need to believe that the work that you're doing is actually going to help you. You need to believe that the work that you do is, like, meaningful, and that you can invest yourself wholly into it. And that includes every part of your life, because unfortunately it's sports in your body and it needs to all come together. But I'm putting the confidence above the, like, actual in-game thinking, because as much as it is important to have game IQ, I think it is more important to be confident that you cannot hesitate when you go out there, right? Like, when I do make a pass, I need to know that I can make a pass. If you shoot and you're, like, thinking, oh, I need to have this 4.45 average and I'm so scared of losing it, like, no, you need to actually just, like, be in the game and believe that what you're doing is best for your team, and that you are as good as you are, right? And that you gain that confidence through working hard. I'm like, oh, I've done this a million times. I'm like, this is something I can do with my eye closed. I can do it in my sleep. I've done so much harder stuff in my training that this is so easy in comparison. Like, have that mentality that your training is your training, and that you are going to be able to perform. Like, could not be more important. So, something to think about. And then finally, the confidence above that, and then finally your actual game IQ. So thinking, pushing limits. Like, if you play tennis, I'm sure you're like, okay, there's this opponent, they have this weak side, or there's this individual, then I know that I can force their right, and that they're gonna have to go to the left, and they suck, and he has no left. Like, that game IQ is the difference between people who are a really good team. Like, I have this friend from Oakland. They had a great soccer team, but they just were, as a team, terrible. They didn't communicate well. They were all, like, individually good players, and they just couldn't put the ball in the net. And that is a prime example of like they don't think. Like honestly, they didn't think as players. They're all from different clubs. They have different styles. Like a lot of them were from Berkeley, and he and some of his friends were at a more Oakland adjacent team. I don't really know, but basically they didn't work together. They didn't have that chemistry. They didn't care. They didn't really watch film. They didn't know where they're supposed to be because they all played different systems. Like it was just overall bad. And that is kind of makes or breaks your team, even if you have the recovery and they ate well and all those other pieces in place. It just doesn't really matter if they're not collaborating as a team, if you don't work together, if you don't have your mental straight. And the reason I say mental instead of collaboration is because, well, there are solo sports like tennis. So you still, wow, I sold that old so bad. Sorry. Uh, it doesn't matter if you just don't have your shit together, right? If like either your mental's off or you don't know where you're supposed to be, you don't have a game plan, like the stuff that you think about in game should all be team related. It should be positional. You should be thinking about your matchups or the weaknesses and what you can exploit in your space, but and all that technique stuff has to be down. Like you can't be thinking about how do I hit a ball. You should be thinking about okay, I put it like top ins. You know what I mean? So that is important, and that is literally the entire gameplay loop. But none of that can happen if you suck. Like if you have no technique, if you're out of shape, if you're not willing to work hard and actually practice on those things and then implement the things that you practice. You have to be able to work harder than the other team, but also work smarter than the other team. And I think working harder is more important than working smarter because you have a really smart team, and if they're lazy, they don't execute, right? And then you need to have that recovery and the eating in place so that you can actually use your hard work, right? Like it's an energy problem. You need the energy in order to run the supercomputer. And it's like it's great if you have a super well engineered computer and it's super smart, but if you don't have enough energy to run it, then it's useless. So that is my ranking for sports. I'm not gonna let this ride out. I make these advice videos very short deliberately so I don't lose track of my thinking or my thoughts. But generally, to recap, it is recovery first. It is recovery, body first. Your body is your tool for sports. You can do nothing without your body. You need that coordination. You need your nervous system together. You need to sleep well. You need to eat well. Like you get shaky if you don't eat well. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that, but like also note that your mental and your physical are not aligned. Like you can feel great like, in your mind, but you might be fatigued and you might be like dying. Not actually dying, but you might be tired. And that is just a very real thing that people have to deal with. That your mental and physical are not necessarily going to be aligned. Like, you could die at any moment. Like, people might not even notice that they have cancer. Like, that's just part of living. And you need to be working and managing that fatigue. So, yes, work hard, but also work smart. And that's why I put recovery above working hard. And then all that mental stuff, it's like, yes, you need to have the recovery and the eating in place in order to have those mental components. But those mental components are also very important, right? Like, actually having confidence, believing in yourself, and having that mind muscle connection, like believing in that execution and actually thinking about the game. Like generally speaking, people who think versus people who don't think do better. Like your intuition might be very good, but at some point in your training, you also had to train that cognition to be good intuitively. And if you have good intuition, you still have to think. So you're still thinking about something. So not to dive into caveats too much, but yes, you have to think and actually exploit the weaknesses of the other team. Like it's unfortunately in competition, it's not about just being the best version of yourself. The best version of yourself has to be better than other people. And if other people are the best version of themselves, have something that you can exploit, you have to and should exploit it in order to dominate, whatever. But yes, that is my sports ranking. Physical over mental, but physical drives mental, and you need the mental. And that's what I've learned so far in my time in sports. It might sound complicated. It's not that complicated, but it is like an entire life commitment. So you need to not only take care of yourself to do good in your sport. Like you can't just show up to practice and then do well. I found that out the hard way in soccer. Like I historically was a just practice player for the longest time, and I just sucked forever until I actually started putting minutes in off the field. And track I was just naturally good at. We always had to inspire the physical over the mental. It's just a must. You need to actually work the physical. And there's another note about the mental parts that I didn't really know, but it's like discipline, and also thinking smart means actively troubleshooting and being like, okay, there's a better way that I can do this. You need to actually try to actively get better and pick a direction. It's like, okay, I want to be stronger. I get better at biceps, or I get better push. Or like you can do multiple things at once. It's perfectly fine to multitask, but whatever you decide to do, be consistent and consistently ask yourself if what I'm doing is actively making me progress, is actively best for my situation. And you need to balance switching up the methods that might be more effective versus just picking a method that is currently effective because you have the momentum behind it. Okay, that's the end of my spiel. I do still love sports and competition, but that is my 2 cents on it. Okay, bye bye. Also, I'm not coaching anymore, so take it with a grain of salt.